This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Not so bad. Yourself?
Good, man. We just got done recording episode 400 not that long ago, and I was kind of talking to you about this book that I've been writing and using OpenAI. And like sometimes when you're using OpenAI or any kind of large language model, you are kind of blown away with like, yep, this is going to replace all white collar workers within whatever, 2-3 years, right? And then you have the moments where you're like, maybe not. And so I had one of those moments this weekend, and this week I've been installing Molt Bot, which is also called ClaudeBot, was the original name. Now it's OpenClaw, and it's all the buzz on YouTube, right? And about how awesome it is. And so I had to install it, right? And I'm not the most technical person, right? But I used to be a server administrator. I know my Linux commands. I was installing it on a Mac OS, and it is not easy to get it up and running. I'm going to tell you that right now. And when you do get it up and running, then you have to build all the integrations to everything. Like it doesn't come loaded with an LLM. You have to connect it. In my case, it was OpenAI. You have to connect it to your productivity apps or whatever apps you want to be able to automate functions to. And that's all with API keys, right? So it's like a big effort. I'm starting to get like hours and hours invested in this thing before I'm even able to kind of test, can I make this thing useful, right? And then I got into actually trying to make things useful. I'm going to make a long story short. It was asking me to go in and edit Python scripts and stuff like that. And I'm like, seriously? This is like going to replace all white collar workers? I don't think so. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that most of the people who are talking about this on YouTube actually didn't install it, actually didn't run it. They just watched other YouTube videos and heard people talking about how great it is. But in this whole process, one of the things I found out about is there's this thing called MoltBook. So there's MoltBot that I installed, and MoltBook, which is a social media website for AI agents, right? So these AI agents are talking to each other. It's kind of like Reddit style. And apparently some of the conversations go like, you know, they're very negative on the humans and we should just get rid of the humans and stuff like that. So I thought it was extremely entertaining to hear about it. And I really, being that this is AI at the center, or at least that's kind of the joking nickname we give it, I figured I would bounce that out there and see if you heard of MoltBook and what your thoughts were.
Yes, I've heard of all of the above. And I was shocked when you texted me that you were going to undertake this. It's like, really? Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting project. And I think I texted you after you had played around for a bit and were kind of like, I guess, not happy with kind of what turned out of it, which is fine, right? It's like, no, this needs to be as a service. The people who are using it now are probably developers. They know how to code. They know how to build this stuff, and they do it all the time, and it's probably relatively trivial for them. But for something like this to take off, it needs to be as a service. Turnkey, where non-developers like you and me can actually, use it and set it up. It needs to be secure. I texted was like, hey, they're finding security issues with this thing. You might want to be careful about hooking it up to your stuff. And so, look, it's cool. It's a very neat idea. It's certainly not ready for prime time quite yet, but I'm honestly impressed that you decided to I don't know. I feel like it was like you spent the weekend kind of working on it, kind of this last week.
Yeah. Well, so just so you know, like the promise of having an assistant that kind of runs in the background that you could just text messages to in WhatsApp is just too irresistible for me to not try it. But it's kind of like it was like stupid because I told it like do all these things and then email me a report. And so it built this Python script, right? And then it said Python script failed. I said, well, why did it fail? Well, the SMTP server is saying that me is not a valid email address.
It's not wrong.
No, it's not wrong. But then it gave me instructions on how to edit the Python script. And I'm thinking, I'm not doing that. And then I said, well, can't you edit the Python script? I said, sure, all done. I'm like, okay, this is not what I pictured, right? Because I was going to give it very complex tasks to go out and hit all the websites like Temu and try to find super inexpensive things that could be resold. And I'm like, if it took me, ME, and made that my email address, this thing's not smart enough to do the things I wanted to do. But thank you for appreciating me going out. I think I know what that means, though, which is that, like, Jim, we have all this real stuff to get done, and you're wasting your time on that crap.
No, not at all. I'm a tinkerer myself, and so I'm always constantly playing stuff. I was impressed that you were undertook it. If anything, this is the kind of thing where this is the thing I would do, and I would tell you about it. And this time, the roles were reversed.
That's okay. Now, I did talk to our guest a little bit about it, so we'll have to get his input. We talked about the MoltBook. What do you think about the MoltBook before we introduce him?
I think MoltBook is a really fascinating experiment. For people not familiar, it is exactly what Jim described. It's kind of like a Reddit, but the idea is that it's only AI agents talking to other AI agents, and it's visible. So MoltBook.com, I'm sure people can find it. It's not a secret or anything like that. I am not sure if it really is that or not. I think I saw an article that was humans might be writing some stuff in there. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I haven't really cared enough to investigate it, but I think it's a very cool idea. If AI is going to take over, that's the kind of thing of all right, we need to be watching MoltBook and monitoring the social networks for AI to make sure that conversations are appropriate, right? Things like that.
If you went to an LLM and said, I want to create an agent and I want the agent to troll people and go out to MoltBot and pretend you want to annihilate all the people and take over the world, it probably would do it. So it may very well be an AI agent with bad instructions.
So here's the problem that I have with this sort of MoltBook experience is that it's trained on the internet. And the internet is, some areas are the, it's, what is it, the Star Wars? It's the hub of scum and villainy. And, I'm looking at a topic here that just says curiosity question. Why do people follow trends? Genuinely curious, looking for perspectives. And there's one bot that just has commented dozens, hundreds of times. It just says, great insight, everyone follow and upvote. And this is the kind of thing you'll see on a Reddit thread where it's just nonsense and people go off into their own little, child comments of a parent thread, right? Things like that. And so, interesting, but I don't know if I'd want something trained on Reddit to be in charge of things quite yet.
I want to throw one other last thing out there. So I was joking around. We've been saying AI at the center for probably 2 years. If people think we should start an AI at the center, if that's something they would listen to, let us know. Put in the comments of the show on YouTube or DM us or however you want to get that information to us.
Yeah, I'm interested in that kind of exploring. I think it'd be a good educational thing for me, learn more, and maybe some folks out there might be able to learn more. So if you're an expert in AI, reach out. Let's talk and figure out how to, marry the two ideas of agentic and identity, which is the hot term for this year.
Yeah, for sure. So just last thing, we've got all the information on upcoming conferences this summer out on the website, idacpodcast.com. You go out there, you get killer discount codes, save yourself a lot of money. So make sure you go out there, get those codes before you register.
Yep. Lots of conferences coming up. I've got a couple of city cybersecurity summits that doing some stuff with CRA with. So if you're going to be in New York or Chicago at the end of February, early March, I'll be at those. And I've got some discount codes for that as well. So love to see familiar faces out there. I think I've got quite a few people in Chicago that might be interesting, which is very cool. Always good to see friends. And I think I've got a handful of people from New York as well. So reach out if you're interested in those things. All right, let's get to our main topic here, because it's time for an update on the world of things like shared signals framework and CAEP or SSF, and then CAEP, CAEP. And I know he'll correct me because I've got it wrong once, Continuous Access Evaluation Profile, which I hope is correct, because I, for some reason, always get the A wrong. I always want to say like authentication, but it's not that. So let me introduce Atul Tulshibagwale. He's the CTO of Signal. He's a co-chair of the Shared Signals and Authzen working groups, and also part of the AIM community group, which we're going to find out a little bit more. Welcome back to the show, Atul.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and great to be here.
So the last time you were with us was way back in episode 255. I think we're probably going to call this one episode number 402. So about a couple years ago, we kind of started off with a conversation around CAEP and SSF with our other friend, Sean Odell, around sort of like a 101. Let's get into sort of what's changed. But there's kind of been breaking news within the last month or so with Signal getting acquired by CrowdStrike. And so maybe if you kind of want to just talk about that real briefly. Obviously, you don't want to spill state secrets or put anything in jeopardy, but tell me a little bit about that CrowdStrike acquisition and kind of how it came about and what's next.
Sure. Yeah. I guess before we get into that, I just wanted to comment on some of the stuff you mentioned when you were talking to each other. And, you're absolutely right, Jeff, that much of the content on that MoltBook thing is fake. It's not real bots, people trying to scam, Bitcoin and all kinds of things over there. But obviously there is some, agentic content there. The question that sort of being an identity person that came to me is that, is there a CAPTCHA for agents, or can there ever be a CAPTCHA for agents, right? Because I don't see how that can, even be possible. Like, because if you're a human and you can pretend to be dumb like an agent, so anyway, something to think about.
Some of us don't have to pretend. We just are. We spend all this time trying to figure out, how to make sure that people are human on the internet. What's the vice versa of that? It's like, okay, the millisecond response time, is it like, well, nobody's going to speak in like Kerberos to me, right? That's like Klingon maybe for another. A handful of people might be able to, but it's not a common language. Things like that.
I could always use an agent as a human to do that. So,
We're just a tool. You're here. It's like 5 minutes in, you're already creating problems, man. Tell me about this CrowdStrike thing.
Yeah. So we just announced, I guess, at the beginning of the year that our company Signal is going to be acquired by CrowdStrike. And the acquisition hasn't closed yet. We're still in that sort of period between when we have signed the acquisition agreement, but we have not sort of completed the acquisition. But yeah, it is a great outcome for our company. It's a great outcome for our customers. And I think it'll be a really good outcome for the industry, because now the Signal technology will be available to a lot many more customers because of the broad reach that CrowdStrike has. So yeah, excited to be a part of CrowdStrike after this acquisition closes.
Well, congratulations, kind of in the flesh, so to speak, virtually at least. I remember sending you a message on LinkedIn and a couple others. I think it's a great pickup by CrowdStrike. I won't play vendor. I'll try to be vendor neutral here, but I think it's a great pickup by CrowdStrike, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. I introduced you as part of the AIM community, and I believe that's the AI Identity Management community. Did I get that right? And that's part of OpenID Foundation?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that, because that was kind of the first time I had heard about it when we were kind of chatting briefly before we got started.
Yeah. So, in the OpenID Foundation, you have working groups which are responsible for creating standards, and you have community groups, which are really just safe spaces for discussing things. And why I call it a safe space is because they still have the OpenID rules of Note Well and Note Really Well, so that your contributions are under the OpenID intellectual property, but it gives you a way to clearly sort of talk about your ideas without having to fear what it means to share that, and does it become somebody else's property and things like that. Because the OpenAD Foundation is this open forum where all intellectual property is licensed freely to everyone's, right? So what we've done as a part of that AIM community group, and it's been pretty popular, right? Our weekly calls get routinely attended by 40, 50 people. Just AI is very popular, and AI identity is a very popular topic, I think. So what we've done is we've created 3 subgroups. There is a subgroup for threat modeling, which is preparing a threat model for AI and identity. And there's a subgroup for taxonomy, which we are trying to build a taxonomy for AI and identity. And then the third one is a use cases subgroup, like where we discuss the different use cases. And one of the first outputs was by the former co-chair of the community group, Tobin South, was an AI identity white paper, which actually is pretty popular. It's on the OpenID website. You can get it from there. I'll share a link so that you can include it in your podcast as well. So yeah, that's the AIM community group in a nutshell.
We had Tobin on sort of the end of 2025, and that was a really good, fun kind of conversation. Is this open for people to join? Is it invite only? Like if I wanted to join this group, can I?
Yes, so you can definitely join both as an individual or as a part of an organization. There's a thing called as the participation agreement that you need to sign, which is a standard OpenID agreement. It basically says that if you say something on the call, it's OpenID property, but then OpenID is obligated to give it out to the world freely. So it makes it easy for you to contribute anything. So,
and I'll put a link in our show notes to the OpenID page that kind of spells this out so people can join.
That's good.
I want to get back into sort of SSF and CAEP. You've been big in these standards for a while. As much as you hate it, you're called kind of the godfather in some of these areas. Shout out to Sean and being on stage with him a couple of years ago. I think it was Identiverse where he put me up to it and said, call you the godfather. Tell me about that role of being co-chair in SSF and CAEP. And I want to spin this into like, how does that help a product like Signal? Because I feel like it's almost like 2 different worlds. Like one is sort of like this open standard, but then you're building a product and it's like, okay, you're trying to sell me a product. So how do you kind of blend the 2?
Right. Yeah. So I think it's fundamentally like, I think there's a lot of alignment in how we see the world as, a part of the CAEP or shared signals and what we call continuous identity, or the continuous security paradigm, and how Signal as a company believes that that's sort of the future, and we're trying to build it out in our product, right? So there's a lot of alignment in that respect. At the same time, the standard needs work. It's a lot of effort, which is for a small company like ours, it was a lot of commitment to have one of us just dedicate so much time to the standard. So developing the standard, which has been a process over the last 4 years since Signal started, we just got the final version of the standard out last year. So it's been a long slog to get it out there. And then the other part is to drive the adoption, right? So through talking on podcasts or in conferences, through meetings with large enterprises or technology providers, we've been able to get adoption for the standard. So that's another big effort that I think helped the whole industry understand that this is something that really helps everyone and takes the industry forward. And the way Signal wins in all this is because we are aligned in our products. This is what we believe is the future of identity. This is what we want to make the world see, that, hey, if you do things this way, you get a more secure future. The way to implement it is using the standard. So what people are buying from Signal is not just the ability to do the standard, but they're buying that continuous identity philosophy, if you will, that this is how you're going to do things from now on.
So I want to ask you more or less like what's happening with those standards, but I also want to reference a blog post that y'all did that was pretty, I think it went viral, right? It talked about how Authzen, CAEP, and shared signals framework all kind of complement one another. In fact, the name it lines up pretty much with that with the blog posts. So what's happening with the standards, and talk a little bit about that blog post.
Yeah. So one of the things that we are doing in the shared signals working group is we have conducted interoperability events where we draw a lot of the participants to have their products work with each other using the standard, right? And this has been amazing. Like Gartner has been so supportive of this. They they gave us the venue for the first interoperability event in London in I think 24 when it first happened. And so what we were able to prove there is okay, there's a product from Cisco, there's a product from SailPoint, and from Signal, Okta. All of these work together, right? But what it also drove was because Gartner has given this venue as this opportunity, so many vendors went from just waiting for each other to committing to having that standard, right? So it was a really good moment for us to be able to have that opportunity. Now, what happened was the Authzen working group did another interop at last year's Gartner IAM event in London. And somebody was coming up to me and asking me, hey, so you're doing shared signals and there's also this Authzen interop. Are these things competing with each other? And I was like, oh, no, this is completely different. And this is how it all works together. And as I was saying that, I was realizing that maybe this is something that the world needs to know. And that's how that blog post came about. And the OpenID Foundation published that blog post, which was co-authored by me and Omri Gazette of Topaz. And so what happened was once that blog post was out, Pat Opet, who's the global CISO of JPMC, posted it to his LinkedIn, which was a very big moment because he has a great following and it got reposted a number of times. It was liked by a large number of people, and so suddenly now everybody knew more about Authzen and shared signals, and we also talked about transaction tokens in that blog post, and so all of that sort of came to the highlight in a short period of time.
One of the things I'm realizing is as we're talking about this, like we've got listeners all over the world who are, maybe they just got into identity and are hearing about this for the first time and trying to figure out, like, have we been talking about shared signals for the past decade? Well, no, right? I think we've been kind of in like a more siloed type of IAM approach and getting certain capabilities in place. And when you look at the identity industry, it's becoming more intelligent, more real time, more continuous. And I think all those are the things that, like, wow, that's when you talk about identity security rather than just identity management. That's the core of it. So don't want to steal your thunder, but I wanted to kind of say, what is it like at a 101 level explanation? What is shared signals framework? What is CAEP?
Right. So the shared signals framework is a versatile framework for, you can say, asynchronously delivering security events between parties on the internet, right? So today you have HTTP for, synchronous communication. Like you open a connection with a server, you immediately get a response in the same, at the same time, right? What is missing on the internet right now is an asynchronous delivery layer, right? And shared signals provides that. The unit of communication in shared signals is a security event token. It's a signed JOT with a certain structure. And that's what you send over the shared signals framework. What it gives you is basically a reliable layer. So once you've sent something to a receiver, you know that the receiver has received it, or you know that there was an error in sending it, and so you can decide what to do with that, right? So because of that reliability, because of that asynchronous nature, it is a versatile way of communicating signals that you might share with other parties on the internet. Now, what CAEP does is, although the origin is very different, it didn't like emerge as something on top of shared signals. Shared signals was drawn from CAEP and risk. So what CAEP is now, it's like Jeff said, it's a continuous access evaluation profile. So it's just a profile of the shared signals framework. It defines a set of events that are important for zero trust, you can say, right? What it does is it basically thinks of a session that you're having with a website, not as a one-time thing that, oh, now you've logged in, so yeah, that's it. You're on your own from now on. That's kind of the view we had when we just had federated identity. What CAEP does is basically thinks of that session as a continuous thing, and it says that, okay, if anything changes on one end, on a party that is interested in that session, it should be able to communicate that to the other party, and the other party should be able to decide what to do with that information, right? So it's a non-prescriptive way of describing changes that affect your session. So an example of this is, let's say I'm using a mobile phone to access a CRM website, right? And I've logged in using my identity provider. There are several things that can change. Like the mobile phone can fall out of compliance. There might be a sort of malware on that phone, or it's not upgraded to the latest operating system. There are known vulnerabilities, and so you want to restrict how much of that CRM data you can download to that phone. You can do that now because the device management company or the endpoint management company can actually send you a signal saying, now this phone is not compliant, right? It used to be compliant when the user logged in. So these are the kinds of things that you can enable using shared signals and using CAEP. So shared signals is this common layer. CAEP gives you zero trust or session related signals. Risk is the other set of events on top of shared signals, which is risk incident sharing and coordination is the full name of that acronym. It gives you account security signals, right? So if your account needs to be purged, or if your password is compromised, you've detected it on the dark web, you know that this password needs to be changed. Those are the kinds of signals that you can send using risk. And now in the IETF, you have the SCIM, System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, SCIM, which has a SCIM events standard, which can use shared signals as the transport. So now you're seeing more and more of these come up on top of shared signals.
I can see so many use cases for this. I mean, generally it's about improving your security posture, but I'm wondering, from the IAM practice, IAM is kind of like the old term we've been using, from the identity practitioner lens. I mean, should we be thinking about this as a solution for our customer-facing systems, external, or is this enterprise, our workforce? Where does the technology fit best, or where do you see it the most?
Right. So shared signals, of course, is a very broad technology. It can be used not just in identity, it can be used outside of identity as well. But things like CAEP and risk can definitely be used in both consumer and employee or internal use cases. I'll give you examples, right? So I gave you the example of an employee accessing CRM on their phone. That's an employee example. Now, I've seen banks who have disparate systems within the bank's infrastructure having consumers who are accessing the bank's services. Now, the bank at some point, at some part of their infrastructure knows that this user is, showing anomalous activity, or there's high risk associated with this user. They don't have a way of communicating that to other parts within their bank, and they're using CAEP. There's a risk level change event in CAEP that they're able to send to mitigate the risk associated with that session right now to within the bank. So that's a consumer example of using shared signals and CAEP for consumers.
How is adoption going for SSF and CAEP? Because I feel like this is something that I've been kind of preaching to, my clients and others, like, hey, start asking your vendors about when they're going to support SSF, how's it going out in the real world?
Okay, great question. So one news I would like to share is that in I think September last year we released the final version of CAEP and shared signals. So one of the challenges we had when we were looking for adoption is that people would say, well, the spec isn't final, right? But now that's not the case. The other thing that happened was that there was a CSRB report in, I think, March of last year or before that, where one of the recommendations was to use shared signals, right? And now what we're seeing is that Apple has implemented shared signals in their Apple Business Manager. So if you want to integrate with Apple Business Manager using a custom IDP, then you have to have shared signals supported, right? So that's one of the first places where you've seen shared signals being adopted entirely in production. Now you have, there was an announcement recently from Google about support for shared signals. It's in closed beta right now. So they are supporting shared signals using that you can revoke sessions in Google based on signals that might be external to it. So device signals or identity providers sending Google signals about session revocation, credential change, and things like that. And so those are the two big, like huge technology providers. There's also Okta, which has supported shared signals. They have I think they work with Apple, of course, but they also have other partners that provide them device signals and all that using shared signals. You have Jamf, which is a device management company that has shared signal support. Omnissa, which is a device management company that used to be a part of VMware and now is an independent company, also supports shared signals. The SailPoint, of course, which has announced support for shared signals. IBM has announced support for shared signals. IBM actually has as a part of their global Verify antenna product. And then, of course, our company Signal supports shared signals right from the beginning. So yeah, I think adoption wise, we are seeing a lot of good support from good, large technology providers. It's in production in some cases, it's in beta in some other cases, but I think we're seeing the movement, and having the final standard helps in that direction.
So I can certainly understand wanting to wait for that final standard to be in place because you don't want to build on a moving target. But now that the target is set, if you're going to make a plea to vendors out there to say, hey, we're ready, like what are some of the benefits that a vendor gets being part of the SSF and CAEP kind of frameworks that are out there?
I think it's not out of the question that pretty much soon RFPs might require you to have shared signals, because there are, if they're following guidelines from the CSRB or, guidelines that might be coming out in the future, you might just have to do that as table stakes, right? So that's one thing. But beyond that, I think it's so much easier to integrate using shared signals and CAEP rather than having to integrate with every other provider's API. I've been in so many meetings at previous jobs that I've held where every company is saying, you write to our API, and then we're saying, no, you write to our API, and it just goes nowhere, right? And so you don't want to get into any of that discussion. You just implement shared signals. You get a lot of capability that you can use with a lot of different partners, and it becomes so much easier for them to interoperate. So that will be the primary reason why you would want to do that. Like if you're, let's say, Zscaler, I was just on a podcast with Zscaler, and they are also committed to shared signals. So all of these ecosystems are coming about, which are using shared signals to just exchange device signals, credential related signals, session revocation, and all those things.
I mean, fundamentally, it's a great solution for a problem that I think a lot of people have of how do these things talk to each other. But I think it's almost like a little bit of a chicken and egg. It's like, okay, first of all, you have to build it, and then you have to have people who want it so that people then build it into their thing. So you've got adoption from like vendors, but then you also need your customers and your real world IAM people asking their vendors for it. So how do we get the word out beyond the globally famous Identity Center podcast? Hey, go ask for shared signals framework. But how do we educate the people to say, hey, this capability is here. It is finalized, at least for a 1.0. How do we make them aware that it exists so they can start asking their vendors to adopt it?
Yeah. So I've been talking relentlessly about this for the past 5 years since I wrote that blog in Google, or maybe 6 years now, right? So I think that there is a natural appeal to this, right? People get it. Like it doesn't take me a lot of effort to explain to people why this is beneficial. There's so much appeal to it, right? There's fundamentally, that is what drives people to saying, maybe I should be having this. And then that starts a sort of a cycle of people asking the question to their vendors, people asking their analysts about it. The analysts get interested, and just being relentlessly sort of talking about it, telling people that why this is important has been a big part of why we're here, is because otherwise you end up in this situation. Yeah, it's a good idea, but nobody has done it. So why should I do it? Right. And having those interoperability events crystallized a lot of that or catalyzed a lot of that momentum, I think. Yeah, it's a long slog.
Well, it's like anything else, right? You have to continually market it and make sure people are aware of it, improve on it where people think that there's an update to the specs needed. This was built in the era of humans, for lack of a better term. Is there application for SSF and CAEP in the world of agentic identity? So AI, MCP, things like the A to A, right? All the different acronyms that are out there.
Yeah, I think right now we're forming these really long chains in MCP of, one agent calling another agent, kind of thing, like an MCP client calling an MCP server, which in turn is an MCP client to another MCP server. And you create these long chains of sort of work, and there's no kill chain right now to it. Like if somebody wants to say, this employee is terminated, just stop all of that right now. There's no way to do that. I think CAEP could be a great way to do that. Beyond that, I think it could be useful in, the communicating the properties changes. Like, let's say I was in a particular group when I started, and now, I don't have access anymore. And so I should communicate that information throughout that chain. Because these tasks can be really long-lived, you want to have that capability to modulate the access as you go, right? And shared signals can definitely do that.
Atul, as you were kind of describing this just resonates with people. I was like shaking my head, yes, because just the concept within the first minute of you talking about it, I don't need to know all the details to know, like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense. I wanted to follow up on one thing that you're talking about, which was talk to your vendors. And let's get a little more specific. What kind of vendors? Would this be your IDP? Would this be your productivity tools? Is the answer like yes to all the above, or like who do you talk to, right? I mean, obviously when you put out an RFP, that's one thing, but we're talking also about apps that probably we have in the enterprise already.
Yeah, I think your SaaS vendors, for example, let's say you're doing federated identity, log into the SaaS, right? How do you get your users out of there if something changes or if something goes wrong, right? How do you modulate the access that you have in that SaaS system based on changes in your directory, or based on changes in, maybe the user is going off duty and you don't want that user to be accessing the SaaS system anymore? How do you affect that? You use CAEP, you use shared signals to do that. And I think talking to your SaaS vendors, talking to your identity providers for sure, which, by the way, there's a lot of good news there that, at least Okta is wholly committed to it. We're also seeing some others look at it favorably. You said productivity apps, like Google Workspace has just committed to it. They've launched their private beta and they'll be supporting it soon. Your device management players like Jamf and others, Omnissa, are supporting it. So all of your vendors, anyone who has a stake in the user's session security, should be adopting CAEP and shared signals. So if you're saying I'm adopting this particular device management platform, you got to ask them, like, what happens if that device posture changes? How are you going to communicate that downstream? And maybe they have a better answer than shared signals or CAEP, but shared signals or CAEP is a good answer.
Right, because shared signals and CAEP would be based on a standard. You're saying they may have a proprietary solution, right? And so generally, I think proprietary solutions are not what you want to build your enterprise architecture on, but we can save that for another show. I think the standard is so important. Where does the standard go from here, right? We're sitting at the beginning of 2026. Where does it need to go in the next few years?
Yeah. I think one of the main things we're doing right now is launching a certification program so that a technology provider can say, my product is certified interoperable with CAEP or with shared signals. What that gives you is the confidence that, when you plug it in, it's not like two companies will say, oh, we both support CAEP, and they actually don't talk to each other because they're doing something different about it. That certification program will help you be assured that if you adopt that kind of product that is certified, then it's going to work with anything else that is certified. So, that's what we're launching right now. Initial launches for transmitters, we'll be working on the receiver part soon after that. There's a bunch of stuff that we punted on in the V1 of the standard. These are important things, but not critical to the success of the standard right now. But those are the things that we will be working on soon after. I think what it will give you is much more capability in terms of what you can do with shared signals and CAEP. And we'll be working on that going forward. So those are a couple of things that we're doing in the shared signal working group right now.
Yeah, the certification program seems like you answered my question right. So certification is for not for people to become experts. It's for companies to have their products certified as SSF and CAEP compliant, right? So it reminds me a lot of what FIDO Alliance is doing, and I think kind of the breaking point for them was when big tech, especially like device manufacturers, the Apples, the Googles of the world, big platform players, Microsoft, et cetera, got behind the FIDO 2 standard and passkeys and things like that. I would imagine that this certification program, it's a big deal, right? There's going to be a lot of people, a lot of organizations that want to get their platform certified.
Yeah, I certainly think so. That many of these companies are on the board of OpenID Foundation, and so I would expect them to be very receptive to having the certification program. So.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I think you alluded to it, but what kind of dates do you have lined up for when the certification program is going to be launched? And if people have questions about the certification program, who should they reach out to?
Right. So you can always reach out to me at the OpenID Foundation, like the Shared Signals mailing list about certification. But you can also watch the OpenID Shared Signals webpage for an update on certification. We'll be publishing a blog post when it comes out. And I want to be super conservative here and saying that in the first half of this year, in 2026, we will be having a certification program for shared signals and CAEP.
So that's exciting news. I want to ask a question because I feel like maybe it's kind of got lost in all the news of SSF and CAEP is what happened to RISC? RASC.
Right. Yeah. So RISC it's actually doing pretty well. It's something that is a little bit of a, it went into the background a little bit because everybody was interested more in CAEP. But if you look at IRS and ID.me and I think the login.gov, they're all using RISC to exchange security signals about accounts. So if you've created an IRS account, then your account provider is going to send risk signals when, let's say, you change devices, or you report your passkey as being like compromised, or your device has been wiped or something like that. They will use risk to communicate those signals to each other. So that is happening right now in production.
Is it fair to say, like, if we say SSF, it kind of means SSF, CAEP, and risk is sort of like a bundle, or is it wholly separate?
SSF can be used with CAEP, can be used with risk, can be used with SCIM events. The certification program right now that we're working on is specific to CAEP, to a few events in CAEP, because those seem to be of most interest to the community that is interested in the certification. But yeah, I've had discussions with large providers about risk and having a risk certification program as well. So when you talk generally about SSF, you're either talking about the platform which gives you the asynchronous capability, or you're talking about SSF in the context of CAEP or risk or SCIM events, right?
So I have something I'm sitting on, because I wasn't sure if I'm going to make a fool of myself in how I asked this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I'm trying to figure out, how does this thing work, right? So you've got, say, and I'll use an example. Say you have your Salesforce application, and that's going to be one of the systems that sends signals. So I'm wondering, does it have some sort of a bus where it puts the signals and you go out and you fetch them? Does it use some kind of broker so that the broker gets it and sends it? Or is it point to point, like Salesforce has to send it to your IDP, for example?
Yeah, great question. So it is a point-to-point transport. So what happens is that when you have two parties that share a user, let's say Salesforce and Okta, for example, right? And Salesforce says that I'm interested in any changes. Like, let's not talk about Salesforce because they don't actually support this right now, but let's talk about Google, for example. So let's say Google is the service provider where you have Google Workspace and you're using Docs and Drive and all that. And Google wants to know if you have changed your password at your identity provider, which might be Okta, right? And so what Google will do is, as they will want to be a receiver of those signals, right? So what they'll do is they'll call an API provided by Okta, and the API is what is defined in the shared signal standard, which is your stream management API, right? And they'll say, I want to create a stream with you, and I want information about these events like credential change or device compliance change or session revoked or whatever else they're interested in. Whenever that happens, you can send me that event uh, over a stream. So there's a point-to-point stream that is created between Okta and Okta as a transmitter and Google as the receiver. And so when, let's say, Okta has that event, they will send a security event token over the stream to Google. And there are two transport. There's a polling transport or a push transport. So Google can either poll for new events, or they can Okta can push new events to Google, and they get acknowledgments about whether that event was successfully delivered or not. And based on that, Okta can decide whether or not to resend that event and things like that. So there's a reliability layer built into all that. But it's a point-to-point transport between a transmitter and a receiver, and they agree on which events they want to exchange. They agree on which subjects they want the events about. You can also do things like verification of the event stream. So the Google can periodically tell Okta, hey, I want to make sure that the stream is still alive. So send me a verification event. So, and when Okta receives that, they're going to send you a verification event. You get the verification event, you find out, okay, the stream is still alive, right? So these are the kinds of things that help build confidence that you're not going to miss a signal. Because it'll be kind of disastrous if you had a device compliance change event and you send that this device was compliant and now it's non-compliant, and the receiver never received it. And so you're relying on that to assert your posture for the user, And if you miss that signal, it's going to be a very bad thing from a security perspective, which is why the reliability of that shared signals framework transport is so important.
Is that where the certification comes in? Is making sure that is working as designed?
Yeah, having all those features is a part of that certification event, certification program.
I feel like there's so much to learn here. And you were kind enough ahead of our call to send like a bunch of links, and I'll have links in our show notes for people to check out. But if I am just getting into this space, right, and I'm not a spec person, what's the fastest way, or is there a YouTube video, a blog article, or something that can kind of get me up to speed on SSF, CAEP, risk, all that kind of stuff?
There's a few YouTube videos. I have sent you the links where I explain just what is CAEP and risk. But what I would recommend is go to the cape.dev website, which helps you. It started as something that helped you test your transmitter and receiver implementation. So if you had a receiver, you needed to have a transmitter that would send you events so that you could know that you can receive them, and vice versa. So it started as that, but now it has a help section. It has, details about like what is SSF and what is CAEP, and it even has a white paper about CAEP best practices. So it can help you like plan your strategy as far as how, adoption, implementation, and all that is concerned. There's also open source which you can use. So cape.dev is actually a pretty good resource in addition to the videos that I talked about.
So I'll have those links in our show notes for people to check out. And that website for people to start at is cape.dev, CAEP.dev. That'll put you right where you need to go. So I feel like we could probably go on for hours, but we're not going to do that. Direct people to websites. Not everyone's able to go to conferences and kind of check out the talks that you and Ian and Tim and Sean and Andrew and Shane and others have given sort of on this topic. But I would highly encourage people. This is the year to like really understand it, because it's such a big foundational part of what continuous identity is all about, which is another big trend that we're seeing in the space. So definitely encourage people to go check that out. I want to leave the conversation to here on a lighter note, as we always do. And I am feeling very anxious because I have not been out of my house sort of area in 2 months. I have not been on any trips. Since I got back from Gartner, we adopted a puppy, so that has taken up almost all my time. Weather here has been sort of weird on the East Coast with like different storm systems coming through. And so my first trip is actually next week. I'm headed out to a conference in Richmond, Virginia. And that's my first time in 2 months going anywhere, which is a long time for me. Usually I'm on the road all the time. But you mentioned that you had gone somewhere recently, which I find very fascinating. Tell the audience where you went and tell us a little bit about this trip.
We went to Kenya, and we went specifically to go to some of their national parks and watch the big games. And it was a blast. It was like unbelievable. Like you enter the park and you're surrounded by these like flocks of like large herds of like wildebeest and zebras and elephants and whatnot. And it's these, really huge vistas of open land and those beautiful trees that they have there. It was just fascinating. But I guess the highlight of the trip was when we were in Masai Mara, one of their, national parks. We saw a bunch of lions hunt down a wild buffalo, and it was fascinating how they strategized and how they isolated one buffalo, and then how they literally like tricked the buffalo into thinking that there was just one little lion that it was trying to fend off, and it pulled that buffalo into this area where the other lions were waiting, and then they all sort of jumped on it, and the poor thing was fighting them for about a half hour. You wouldn't believe the amount of effort it took to just pull down that buffalo, like for like the 4 lions that were on it. Like it was pretty dramatic. And as soon as that starts happening, you have these vultures circling around in the sky, and you have the hyenas kind of coming closer and closer, and finally, when the buffalo comes down, you had these lions start eating it, and after a while, the hyenas chased the lions out, and then they started eating the buffalo, and the vultures came in, and it was the whole deal. It was like, wow, I didn't imagine I would be seeing something like that from like a distance of 30 or 40 feet. So yeah, it was unbelievable.
That's pretty close. Look, this is probably not a thing for everybody, because I think people might get kind of squeamish around that kind of thing. But this is you're observing nature. This is what's happening.
Yeah, and it's cruel. I couldn't watch the half of it. Like, I was like, okay, I don't want to see anymore, but I was there.
Did you go with your family? Were there others? Like, how did this work?
Yeah, I went with my my 2 grown kids and my wife, and so yeah, we were all there. We had flown in from different parts of the U.S., and so we met there. So
tell me about the trip. Like, where did you come? Like, where did you meet into Africa?
My younger son lives in New York, and so we met in Amsterdam, and we had the same flight from Amsterdam to. My older son lives in San Francisco, which is close to where I am. Hence that little thing there, which is my son's gift to me. And so we started our trip in San Francisco airport, and the 3 of us, my wife and I and my older son, flew from San Francisco. We met in Amsterdam to my younger son. He almost missed the flight, but we fortunately were able to do that. And then we went to Kenya, and then we went around in a Jeep for, I guess, about 8 days. We were like driving continuously for 6-7 hours for a few days, like, because all these parks are in various different places, and
so it wouldn't be a question on this show, at least, about food. What was the best thing you ate on that trip?
Oh, I have dietary restrictions, so I eat chicken, but mostly vegetarian, right?
Fine. There's plenty of good stuff out there.
The thing about this trip was that there's a huge Indian community in Kenya, if you will believe that. And so you had a live dosa station in the hotel, which is like, you don't even get that in many hotels in the US. Like, you get that in Kenya. And so yeah, it was as far as local food is concerned, there were a bunch of dishes in the buffet. I don't know their names, but they were awesome. Like, some of the exotic fruit were like something that I'd never had. It was a very different experience. Yeah.
Jim, you're a world traveler. Would you do this?
Well, I've heard Nairobi is a beautiful city. I definitely would like to go there. Absolutely. So I want to bring up the great Frank Villavicencio, right? He told me a story where he went on safari. I think it was in Zimbabwe, and very similar story to what Atul just mentioned. And he mentioned that, like, because I can barely watch that stuff on TV, right? To actually be there, smell the smells, hear every sound, no commercial breaks, right? I mean, like, you're in this thing. And he said he and his wife cried. I believed it. I did have a question for you, Atul. So one of the things I've seen that was like on YouTube was like, so there are these tourist vehicles, right? And they're like looking for something like this because that's what everybody came to see, right? Everybody's on safari. They want to see nature unfold. So then you have one of these great hunts going on, and then it's like 10 of these vehicles kind of like make a circle around the hunt. Was that what it was like?
Yeah, it was like that. There was at some point I felt like the lions actually used that to their advantage, like, because there was this massive herd of buffaloes, and there was a bunch of lions trying to approach that herd, and so everybody in the park, like tourists like us, felt like, oh yeah, there's a hunt going to happen now, and so everybody had their jeeps like come in there. There was 50 odd jeeps there, I think. And then the lions kind of used that as a way to deflect because everybody's attention was in one direction, and the hunt actually happened right behind us. So they used that to separate out the herd, and I think what they did was, because everybody's attention was in this way, the buffaloes on the other side kind of got separated out or something, and then they went and attacked them. So I think the lions actually ended up using the situation to their advantage. So, but yeah, there were a lot of people.
Jeff, thanks.
Well, here's how I'm going to make it a lighter note. If there ever was a real world scenario for shared signals framework and risk events, those buffaloes should have been on that. There you go. Lighter note achieved, I hope. Okay. Well, on that terrible lighter note, no offense, not for you, Atul. There's just a terrible segue. We're going to go ahead and leave it there for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll have your LinkedIn connection information along with just a handful of links around CAEP and SSF and risk and AI identity management community group for people to check out. And thank you again so much for joining us. So let's see what else. Check our website, idacpodcast.com. We've got all of our discount codes there for the conferences that are coming up. Hope to see you there. We'll be at EIC. We'll be at Identiverse. I think we got other things in the works and plans and things like that. So thank you so much for liking and subscribing and sharing with a friend or an enemy, as long as they're listening. I don't care who it is. And we'll leave it there. So thanks, everyone, for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with y'all in the next one.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.